everybody! Today we are going to read a book called Small Wonders, and you guessed it, it's about insects. So, it's about a scientist named Jean-Henri Fabre and his world of insects. I don't know if I said his name correctly. Might have. Who knows? Let's read. Once there was a village in the sunny south of France, a village much like any other, where the cocks crowed and the church bells rang, and everyone seemed to know his or her place. Everyone, that is, except one. At the very edge of town, behind high walls and plane trees, there stood a pink house. In the house lived an old man with beetle black eyes and a black felt hat who talked to animals. Whether he was a sorcerer or simply a madman, no one could agree. On the hottest afternoons, he squatted in the sun, watching beetles dig holes. On the darkest nights, he crouched in the bushes, watching spiders build webs. He paid the village children to find dead moles and lizards for a penny apiece. Then he set them out in the garden to lure bluebottle flies. There's a boy who said, "Found this lizard, you can have it." Inside the house, according to rumor, lurked even stranger things. Scorpions scuttling in cages, swallows darting through open windows, pickled sea creatures arriving in crates, and roasted caterpillars, one man swore it, for dinner. Over the years, the old man's reputation grew and grew, cocooned in mystery. And then, one bright fall day, when the old man was very old indeed, the villagers heard the strange chug-chug-chug of motor cars in the valley. The cars, sleek and black, rumbled up to the top of the pink house in a swirl of dust. A figure stepped out, and then another figure with a familiar face. It was the President of France! The villagers whispered and stared. Who was this man, this mysterious neighbor who spoke to presidents and beetles alike? Wow, he must have been an important person. His name was Jean-Henri Fabre. There are many paths to genius. Monsieur Fabre had begun on the side of a mountain nearly a century before. Little Henri lived in an old gray farmhouse that was the only house for miles. In fact, it was the only anything for miles, other than the pigs and cows that trudged through the bogs, the potatoes that strained against the stony soil, and the gorse bushes that clung to the rocks. After dark, Henri fell asleep to the whipping of the wind and the howling of wolves. My neighbor's out there. But where others might have seen a harsh gray world, a world of rocks and bogs, cow dung and rain, Henri saw a world of small wonders. Here was a sky blue jewel on the bottom of a leaf, or so it seemed. Here was a hen's egg in moss, round and white, yet soft as a pillow. Here was a tiny ram's horn carved in stone. Here were diamonds and gold dust, treasures locked in the hollows of pebbles. Only later would he learn the real names of these things and repeat them to himself like magic charms. Hoplia beetle, amanita mushroom, ammonite fossil, quartz crystals, and mica flakes. For now, they were nameless miracles. When Henri was 7 years old, his family moved into town and he started school. Still, he found marvels everywhere. When his father sent him to mind the ducks at the pond, Henri came back soaking wet, his pockets sagging with treasures. While his classmates scribbled their lessons in Latin, Henri fiddled with wasp stingers and snapdragon pods hidden in the nooks of his desk. Mostly he kept these things to himself. No one else seemed to understand. What good, demanded his teacher, could ever come of squinting at flowers when there was Greek and arithmetic still to master? Henri's father moved the family from town to town, searching for a better life that seemed forever out of reach. By the time Henri turned 16, he decided to strike out on his own. He joined a railroad crew, sold lemons at a market, and lived sometimes on little more than grapes snatched from roadside vineyards. And yet, everywhere he looked, small wonders called to him. Every patch of dirt and tangle of weeds buzzed with insects, dazzling beetles, ferocious wasps, sweet-singing crickets, and more. At last, Henri found a job as a teacher, but the classroom was dark and clammy. He took his students outside, where they learned the songs of grasshoppers and drank honey from the clay nests of mason bees. However, Henri soon realized that he now had little time to study his beloved insects. For years, nothing seemed to come easy, except for one great happiness. He fell in love and married a young teacher named Marie. But their first 2 children died, and exhausted by grief, Henri felt his insects slipping away. Still, he pressed on with his studies, finally earning the highest degree possible. And then, one winter evening, Henri read an article that would rekindle his greatest passion. It told of a certain wasp, the Cerceris, that hunted beetles nearly twice its own size. Each mother wasp left a beetle in her burrow along with her eggs, a meal for her children to be. The beetle was dead, or so it seemed, yet however long it lay in that burrow, it stayed fresh. Had the wasp mastered the secret of preserving life beyond death? Henri had read books about insects before, but they were dull beyond measure. Now his curiosity caught fire all over again. What about the lives of these animals? Lives full of drama and mystery. So he went out to stalk the Cerceris. He dug up the wasp burrows. He gathered beetles by the hundreds. He brought them home to poke and prod. He spent hours bent in the grass, watching those wasps hunt. And at last, he arrived at an answer. The beetles weren't dead at all. They were simply paralyzed, made forever still by one well-aimed stab from the wasp's venom-tipped stinger. When the baby wasps hatched, they ate their giant meal alive. Wow. Henri's findings caused a stir among his fellow scientists. It was hard to say which was more startling, the discovery itself or the unknown outsider who had made the discovery. Eager to share what he had learned, Henri taught classes for anyone who was interested. But when the authorities found out he was teaching, they were not pleased. A bloodthirsty exploit of ant warriors? The secret love life of plants? Before he knew it, Henri was out of a job. The next few years were dark ones, and one harsh winter, Henri caught a fearsome case of pneumonia. Shivering in bed, he was struck by a dreadful thought. He was going to die. But he could not bear to go without saying goodbye to his beloved insects. He told his son of a colony of bees nearby, fast asleep in their winter nests. Soon the boy was back with a handful of bees, still as stones. He laid them out on his father's bed. Just as Henri moved to touch them, he saw a sudden twitch. Then another. The bees were stirring, brought to life by the heat of the fire. They fluttered their wings, stretched their legs, and wiggled their antennae. Before long, they were buzzing at the windows. Henri's heart leapt at the sight. Here was a reason to live. The insects needed a champion, someone to reveal their secrets to the world. In the weeks and months that followed, Henri began to write like a man possessed. His words often flowed and danced like poems. He wrote of the great peacock, the bat-winged moth with what seemed like a sixth sense. Henri combed almond twigs for the moth's cocoons. He kept each cocoon in a jar until the moth emerged. Wow. If it was a female, a marvelous thing would happen. At night, called by some trace of a scent, the male moths from miles around would be drawn to the female in the jar. He wrote of the processionary, that humble caterpillar that traveled in great caravans, end to end, day into night. Henri found he could place a line of caterpillars on the rim of a flower pot, connect the back of the line to the front, and watch the creatures march in circles for days. He wrote of the impusa, or devilkin, that strange and fierce-looking insect with its great spike-lined claws and its warrior's headdress. To his surprise, Henri found it a delicate creature, very choosy and picky about its meals. And he wrote of the Sisyphus, the tiny dung beetle with what seemed like a model marriage. Henri watched each pair as it rolled a ball of dung, precious food for its babies, back to the nest. The beetles might work for hours, the female pulling, the male pushing from behind. Henri wrote about dozens of other insects as well, each with its own fascinating story to tell. And as the years passed, word slowly spread of this curious hermit with the golden pin. Eventually, Henri had enough money to fulfill his oldest dream. He and his family found a tiny village with a pink house, tucked away behind high walls and plane trees that seemed just right. It was here that he set about building his insect's paradise. As Henri worked, the seasons passed. Each season and each year brought new marvels. But did others see these things, really see them as he did? This is what Henri asked himself as he neared his 90th birthday. Looking back on his difficult life, he saw it as a small flower coaxed from stony soil. If his books had lit even the tiniest spark of wonder in one reader's heart, he thought, then perhaps he had been of some use. It was then that the news came. The leading scientists in France had gathered to nominate one of their own for a tremendous honor. The vote had been unanimous. Jean-Henri Fabre, the insect poet, was to be put forward for a Nobel Prize. Now, thought the commissioner, where can we find this man, this hidden treasure? And so it was that the farmers of the little village of Seringuin turned from their fields to discover a once-in-a-lifetime sight. The President of France's gleaming motorcade roaring down their dusty street. One by one, the villagers dropped what they were doing. They ran towards the pink house, just in time to see their madman, their sorcerer, receiving his guest like a king. We have, all of us, men and animals, some special gift. One child takes to music, another is quick with figures. It is the same way with insects. One kind of bee can cut leaves, another builds clay houses. In human beings, we call the special gift genius. In an insect, we call it instinct. Instinct is the animal's genius. That was a quote by this man who's a real person. So, This is a real book about a real scientist who studied insects in real life. Pretty cool, guys. Pretty cool. I'm sure you can find some insect facts to add to your insect journal after listening to this story, and I hope that you really liked it. I hope you have a great day, guys. See you later. Bye.